Better Tech, Better Living. We're a couple minutes late because it's almost the punchline to a joke. What happens when three IT people try and get onto a web broadcast and everyone's having something go wrong? But we're here, we're ready to go, and really appreciate you waiting around. If you happen to be watching a recording of this, then we're broadcasting or trying to broadcast usually every Tuesday and Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time or Standard Time, whichever one we happen to be on, and hope you can check us out live. I have two amazing, wonderful, intelligent, powerful guests tonight, and I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about how do we empower women in technology than our two guests today. I want to start with a colleague who I actually met through the speaker circuit and got a chance to see her speak at the Project Summit Business Analyst World conferences, where she was phenomenal. So good that my boss said, convince her to join our company, and we were able to get her. Welcome, Allison Straker.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Hans. It's awesome to be here today.
Fantastic. After delivering a webinar on business analysis, I was contacted, and often I say, reach out to me. I'm here to help. And Stacey reached out to me, which was wonderful and rare. And then I actually got to know her, and she's one of the most driven, empowering, taking responsibility, and never stopping. I don't know how she sleeps. I don't know that she has any free time. I never ask her what she's been watching because I don't know how you could fit in TV to the busy schedule. But somebody that I really admire for her drive and perseverance, Miss Stacey Johnson.
Thanks, Hans. I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad to finally be live with you and Allison. It's exciting to have that chance.
Well, one of the things that ended up wanting me to bring the two of you together is both of you are actively involved, both personally and professionally, at helping empower women in technology and as part of other affinity and empowerment groups within the organizations you've been a part of. And I'd just love to start out with that. We're all pretty busy. We're all pretty stressed, let alone what we've dealt with over the last year. And yet this has still been a priority. What drove you to take this proactive stance and to really help others? And how does this fit into your other priorities?
I can say for me, in terms of fitting it into priorities, you just have to fit it in. It's just something that's that important. You just make time to give back, to help others, to help bring others up, and hopefully, help bring yourself up as well. It is really important to support other women in tech. A lot of organizations, IT organizations, just don't have the representation that they need to have. It doesn't represent, the demographic of women. So you just kind of have to do what you can to support those who are in tech, to help elevate them, to help them succeed in their careers.
Yeah, definitely. I would have to agree with Allison. That representation isn't there. We always hear from organizations that they want more diversity and inclusion, but honestly, from a business side, it kind of is difficult to find access to women in technology if you don't already have access to them. And we, as women in technology, have access. And I also recognize how beneficial it is to reach back and help ones find their way to what I have found to be, a happy home for me in IT, because I know what benefit that these individuals can have to IT, and I know what benefit IT can have to them. So I feel like it's a personal responsibility to do that reach back effort and really share what I've learned and pull people along.
There's a lot of allies who may have trouble understanding the challenges because they can't experience them. And when we talk about representation and having role models, can you talk to me a little bit about why that's important? who were some of the role models, or when did you start seeing where representation maybe was getting better or gapping? What does that mean so that everyone can understand why that's so important in our workplaces?
Yeah.
You want to go ahead, Allison?
I was like, I went first last time. Let me let Stacey go first this time.
Okay. So, the way that I got into technology, I started out in a finance position, actually, in an underwriting processing sort of role, and found that I completely understood the systems, both as a user, but also what it was doing in the background. And I kind of fell into IT. So, I recognize from the vantage point of someone who didn't know that there was a place for me in IT, that if someone doesn't tell you and you don't fall into it that way, you don't know. And so when I got into IT, I saw that there were a lot of women like me, a lot of people in my circle who knew things in IT, or who had those abilities that you don't necessarily think are technically or technical. That customer service that's required in product service and things like that. That people don't realize that that's beneficial. So when I look at the audience, or the peer group that I have, and don't see people who look like me, then I understand that it's my responsibility to say, hey, I know you don't know, but we fit here, and here's how, and really share that with any and everybody I can.
Yeah. No, it's true. You do need to sort of be able to reach back and give back like that. For me, my example was from a tech perspective. I guess the example was my dad. Not a female, but still a black male. And as I grew older, I realized that there weren't a lot of black people in tech. My parents raised me, both of them raised me to kind of think that I could do anything. I just had to work crazy hard to do it. And so, they really pushed me to stuff that I, resented as a kid, do extra homework and all this other fun stuff that I, really didn't enjoy then. But as I grew older, eventually I came to appreciate it. Took me a while, but I got there. um, but one of the things, my dad was in tech. And so one of the things that he pushed me to do was, I had to do like, coding as a child. And so for me, going into school, yeah, it made sense to do computer science. And so I just did it because it was something I had already done at home. But as I looked around, I realized not everyone had that. And especially once I got into these tech classes and stuff, and I saw that there weren't a lot of women there. There weren't a lot of black people. There weren't a lot of women. There weren't a lot of black women. So, for me, it became even more important. Like you said, Stacey, you want to look around and see people, like you want to see, like you mentioned, Hans, someone, representation that could, kind of bring you along and make you feel like, yeah, I could succeed in this career. So it just became more important to me as I realized that I was underrepresented, to look around and see what I could do to help others so that they wouldn't feel alone, so that they would do something for themselves as well, so that they could actually excel in their careers.
That's awesome. What are some of the ways that you found have been successful? So I'm sure we've got people out there who want to be more, to do more, want to be a role model, want to give back as well, and share and help the next generation or others be successful. What are some of the ways that you found that have paid off better? And if there's any ways where you said, yeah, that just didn't work out and wasn't worth the effort, how can people help contribute to creating, these more diverse workplaces, and, helping out some of the people, I'll leave it at that. What are some of the ways they can help?
It was interesting. Well, one of the things that that kind of mentioned that kind of struck me is, failure. Making mistakes. I think one of the key things is having the ability to make mistakes, having the space, the room, the breathing space, to make mistakes, and to know that you'll be supported with it. And I think that's where having different, affinity groups, women in tech groups and stuff, helps to, provide that level of, it's okay. I made mistakes too. It's not that big a deal. We can, maybe a big mistake, but you can still overcome it. You can still do better. I think it's really challenging when you feel like, I can't make a mistake because then I'm out. And then it's, it's the end of the world for me. So I think having the example, having that support system around is important so that you can make mistakes and hopefully even learn from others' mistakes so that you're not making too many of your own as well.
Yeah, that's a really great way to think about it. I think there's two ways also that we can um, in, grow that industry from the side of someone interested in getting into it. My favorite tip to give anyone is if there's a role that you're interested in, go out to your Indeeds or your other business sites and look at job descriptions. Look at the things on those job descriptions that you have and that you don't have, and then find ways to get those. There is a world full of information, certifications, courses, and everything else available to people now. So if this is something that you're interested in, don't be afraid to look at what the future goal for you is and find out what you need to do to get there. And then the other side of it, as you're trying to pull more people in, I think granting, especially as women, granting yourself the grace of acknowledging that the mistakes you made got you to where you are, and that's good. So when we're in the mistakes, we are beating ourselves up and we're wishing we hadn't and shoulda, woulda, coulda. But when you look back at the mistakes that you've made and see that you were able to come out of them, see the lessons that you learned from them, it's almost our obligation then to go back to people who haven't made those mistakes yet and say, here's what I did. Don't do that. Here, try it this way, try it that way, so that they don't have to make those mistakes. So we're growing the people behind us as we make our mistakes.
Absolutely. And as the comments are flooding in, especially from a number of people watching on Facebook, you two have quite a fan base and audience. So you'll have to get virtual autographs at some point. I'll leave that up to you afterwards. Well, when you talk about, it's okay to make mistakes, there was a statement that I heard Allison make when we were through similar conversations about diversity and inclusion, which was, we feel we make a mistake, but then we're being judged based on our classification. And that means we have to work harder. We have to be more perfect. We have to outperform other people because we're overcoming this implicit bias. How have you overcome that in your careers, both being so successful in where you've gotten to so far?
So part of that is your own voice. So there's a couple things to that. First of all, other people's opinions of you are none of your business. They can't help you or hurt you. So your opinion of yourself is what's going to get you further. And then it's our responsibility to challenge that status quo. And that's not the business status quo. That's not someone else's status quo. But what are those things that stop you constantly? What are those things that you're telling yourself constantly? I can't do this because I haven't gotten a degree, or I can't do this because I've never done it before. Those things that you're telling yourself, challenge those. Is it true, or is it what I'm telling myself so that I can safely not take a challenge? If it is that you're trying to keep yourself safe, try something. I tell people all the time, you can't blaze trails without starting fires, and sometimes you have to start those even inside yourself to push past those fears.
Totally agree with that. I mean, Hans, one of the way that I met you, like you mentioned earlier, was through the PMBA conference. And for me, that was a matter of pushing myself. I had not spoken before that. I had always been a very quiet person. And so, I thought, let me try this. What's the worst that can happen? I could fall flat on my face and be embarrassed for the rest of my life and hide myself away and not show myself, or I could just try it, and see what happens. And so, it was a matter of pushing myself to see what I could do. And I did okay. And I think that's, to your point, Stacey, I think that's what you have to do. Just try to push yourself, get out of your comfort zone, try to do something new, and hopefully you do okay. Again, having that support system, having people around you who will help you if you fall, when you fall, is a big, it's a little bit of a comfort that we all need. So make sure that you align yourself with people who can be that supportive of you.
One thing you mentioned, Allison, that I really, really like is you said, I can fall flat on my face, I can do this terrible job and I can never ever speak again, or it can go really well. We have that ability to say that every single time. The future is not known unless you're a fortune teller, which at that point, sure. But for the most part, the future is not certain. You have the ability to say it can be this or it can be that. Choose the happy path. Why do you have to choose the negative path every time? You can choose the happy path and manifest that. That's something that you have in yourself. And then it takes that anxiety away because now you're looking at the positives in the future instead of considering what terrible things can go wrong.
Well, you both have mentioned the strength of having a network. And not only have you both been great mentors to others, but I'm sure there's been people who have helped and influenced you in your career. One of the most surprising things that I find is people are scared to ask somebody for feedback or to be a mentor or, hey, can you spare 30 minutes or 15 minutes to tell me a little bit more about your job or your role? Because I think I might want to do that in the future. How can people overcome that fear and find coaches, find mentors, find peers that they can talk to help make this journey a little easier?
Yeah. I mean, I think some of that is really just pushing yourself out there and, reaching out to someone who has that dream job or someone who has a job that you're not even sure if it's your dream job. Maybe it might be, maybe it might not be, but you want to find out a little bit more. Or you just see someone who's successful and maybe that's not your job. Maybe it's a CIO and you don't want to be a CIO, but you still want to, find out about them and how they've achieved success in their path. So that hopefully you can have some of that success as well. It's just a matter of reaching out to people and connecting with them. Sometimes it's easier than others. Not going to pretend that it's always easy. And so some of that is, again, it's having that stepping stone, having a network of, again, that safe space. Maybe it's someone, Stacey might know someone that I want to talk to, or Hans might know someone that I might want to talk to. So reaching out to your contacts and seeing who they know, who they can help connect you to so that you can reach and connect with somebody else who might be able to help you in your career. So, it's not necessarily that you have to take this big jump. There are supports around you who can help you. They don't have to be the CEO or the CIO or any other kind of C-suite. They don't have to be, some big wig person. They could be just your ordinary person. Not that you're ordinary, Hans. We all know you're extraordinary. You are. But, it could be anyone who's able to really help to connect you and to reach out to somebody. And that person, it's funny. People are more willing to help than we all think. A lot of people are really excited about the opportunity to give back and to connect with people, and they don't know how. They don't know who to reach out to connect to. So you're asking them is actually helping them because now they don't have to hunt around and figure out who they should connect to. You've already done half the work for them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So much about what you just said is what stopped me for a while. The fear that, oh, I don't want to bother anybody or I don't want to take up anyone's time. But when you realize that when you're reaching out to someone and asking them to support you in that manner, you're communicating to them that you recognize that they have something to offer. That's a compliment. So don't look at it as I'm going to be wasting someone's time or they don't want to be bothered with me. In most cases, people in successful roles had role models. So they recognize the benefit of having role models and typically want to help. I have yet to find anyone who said, no, I don't want to help you. I can say that there are some people who are more available than others, but I definitely know that people want to help. And what I've taken on as an individual in my organization, because I have great mentors in my organization, I speak with the VPs and CIO and everybody in my organization all the time. It's kind of just how I am. But what I found when I did that is they're really receptive and extremely helpful. They want you to grow. They want you to succeed. But what I also learned is that they're also extremely receptive to your feedback. And they want to know how their organization is going and what they don't know, what those blind spots are for them. So we don't always have to think about mentorship or networking as being something where only there's one person who is benefiting from it. Both parties can benefit from those relationships. So see it as a tool and a way to succeed, not as a matter of you need something, because the truth of the matter is that you can be just as beneficial as the person who you're looking for help from.
Yeah. And as some of our commenters have said, there's a tremendous power in positive networking. And Heavenly Dew just mentioned that mentoring gives the mentor new opportunities to grow as well, which is absolutely true. For those of you just joining, we have the utterly amazing Allison Straker and Stacey Johnson joining us to talk about empowering people, especially empowering women in technology and in the workplace. If you have questions for them, the conversation has been amazing so far. Please feel free to throw them in the chat and we'd be happy to bring those in. One of the things that you kind of alluded to, both of you earlier, was a little surprising that everybody isn't psychic. That for some reason, when I'm feeling bad about myself or second guessing how someone perceives a mistake I made or a faux pas, that, you're telling me that I'm not accurate, that they're over judging me or judging me for the wrong reason, and that it might be okay. How do we overcome that? How do we overcome the fact that of all the critics in the world, most of us are the worst critics to ourselves and we judge ourselves unfairly? How do you help people get away from that, especially when they're then looking at potentially implicit bias or other reasons to doubt their ability and their value?
So you can read from a person who you're talking to sometimes how they feel about you, right? We've got cues. You can see in posture or facial expressions, whatever. But unless you're talking to someone and they expressly tell you that you've done something wrong or that they're upset with you, then any manifestation of the fact that they're upset with you in your mind is projection. You're upset with yourself. So it's about self-care. It's about grace for yourself. Self-care, in media and everything is all about face masks and bubble baths, but truly self-care is caring about yourself, giving yourself the permission to make mistakes, giving yourself the permission to learn from those mistakes and try for opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily try for, and giving yourself the respect that you work hard and that you know what you're doing and that it's okay. And even if you don't know what you're doing, you know how to learn. I think that's the biggest thing. Anytime that I've ever been like, someone is so mad at me or someone doesn't like me or someone doesn't like what I did, when I talk to them, it's not nearly as big a deal to them as it was to me. So it's usually that self-talk that causes those issues as opposed to truly how someone else feels about you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're exactly right. We all evaluate ourselves a lot more harder than others would, and we have to learn to forgive ourselves. We have to realize that it's okay, and we have to look at the mistakes that we make as a learning opportunity. It's a free course. Think of it that way. You don't have to pay to learn about what not to do. You've made that mistake yourself. So it's a matter of looking at it as a learning opportunity. And again, realizing that others make mistakes as well. Others are growing from them. One of the things I find interesting in today's society is when you look at social media, people position all the wonderful things that they do. Look at what I did. Look at this. You hear about all the overnight successes, and you don't really realize that the overnight successes did not happen overnight. They're things, they're, growth that people have had over tons of failures, tons of lack of sleep, tons of other things. We just see that final product because that's what they're positioning on social or in the news or whatnot. So it's a matter of really recognizing that all of those people and you as well are going to learn through your failures, through your mistakes, and being able to overcome based on that knowledge.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a brilliant fitness coach who tells you all the time that people see your here. They didn't see the journey before then. And I think that's so true. They definitely want to be where you are as opposed to where you began, and don't really take a look at the steps that it took you to get to where you are. But the other end of that is nobody can see that unless you show it to them. So nobody in social media, you can't see that because people aren't showing it, but we're doing ourselves and our communities a disservice, because what people need to see is this was really hard. I fell really hard at this, but I kept going, as opposed to look at where I am now. I mean, it's a great look, it's a great picture, but it's not doing anybody any good.
Yeah.
Well, Chantel, who's watching on YouTube, says, I think you two have a book in store, because this is great, and they want it in writing. And what amazing statement. So the feedback has just been super positive. I know not to write a book. If I had a book on my successes, it would be a pamphlet, and everything I've done wrong would probably be bigger than the Encyclopedia Britannica. For you millennials, you'll have to Google what that is. It used to be Google in print format. It used to be how we did reports back in the Stone Age,
when dinosaurs were around.
Well,
No,
Stacey and one of the things Stacey and I have in common is speaking, at conferences in the US and Canada. And one of the first things I say when I'm working with speakers to help them, especially if they're doing their first one, is there's only one person in the room who knows what you meant to say. So go with it, because whatever you said was right. And it's better to do something good now than figure out something perfect later. So don't fret. The fact that you took a stance, the fact that you took action puts you way ahead of others. And that's what really takes courage, is to just keep taking those steps and saying, you know what, some of them aren't going to work. Maybe most of them aren't going to work, but the ones that do are worth that journey.
Absolutely. I actually think that shooting for opportunities that are well above what you think you can reach for and failing is better for you almost than succeeding at everything that you reach for. Because if I reach for the moon, I fall in the stars. And that's a true statement with anything that we do. If I apply for a job that I don't necessarily qualify, but I try for it, well, then when that person tells me no, they also will tell me what things that I can do to get there next time. I would not know that if I didn't try. So I feel like sometimes those failures are actually the better currency than the successes.
Yeah, I also think it's important to share some of the failures, because it's amazing how it resonates with people. I remember, obviously pre-COVID, they had a series of events. It's probably moved virtual, but the whole idea of it is that it's about people going and talking about their failures, because these are organizations that you've heard about that, again, overnight success. You hear about how wonderful they are and how they're a multi-billion-dollar or whatnot company, and you don't hear about when they forgot to pay their bills, or they, did this and they messed up, or they, what they did. So what they did wrong, I mean. And so sometimes hearing that is inspiring. Back about a decade ago, my sister and I owned a store. And so for us, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We decided, let's try to open this. And we somehow in our spare time, we decided to blog about it. And so we wrote a little, write-up, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. The amount of people who were following us and following our story, again, we didn't really know what we were doing, so we were messing up, of course. And we got to where we wanted to get to, but they followed along that journey, and they were excited about it because they weren't just hearing about perfection. They were hearing about, well, they did this wrong. Oh, well, why did they do that? But, and eventually we got to where we wanted to be. But again, it's people need to be willing to share their mistakes, especially if you're looking to support others. Share your mistakes with them. Let them know that you're not an overnight success. Let them know that maybe you're not even at the successful point that you want to be at. But share those stories with people so that they can grow from them and realize that they too can grow as well.
Absolutely.
So if we're going to be role models, if we're going to represent our background, our perspective, so that others can see themselves represented in people who are successful like the two of you, one of the steps coming on the show today, which I greatly appreciate, so that everyone who views this can hopefully see a little bit of themselves in each of you, and be encouraged to take that step. But we've also talked about how scary it is to put yourself out there. And Allison, your blog going, hey, I'm blogging about all my mistakes. How do we overcome the fear? How do we help people that maybe they don't want to get up and broadcast, or maybe they're even scared to be on a show, or they're scared to post? How do they start finding a safe space or encouraging themselves to get out there so that not only can they grow, but they can also start being a representative that other people can look up to?
I think for me, it was about baby steps. I, was blogging and didn't know who was going to be reading it, didn't know how it was going to be received. So it wasn't it didn't feel that dangerous to me to put my stories out there. And then when we finally were able to achieve something that I said, okay, I'm okay with, obviously we weren't perfect, but I was in an okay state and people were reading it. It was a little bit more incentive to keep going and to still continue to write a little bit about what we were doing and the challenges and successes that we encountered. So sometimes it can be a bit of baby steps, especially if in our circumstance we did have some support, other people who had opened stores, but it was still it was still us. We didn't really know what we were doing, so. Doing the baby steps, having the baby steps was sort of our means of having a little bit more support and giving us a little bit more of that confidence boost.
Yeah, those baby steps are huge. And I think people feel as though they're not doing anything if they're just having a conversation, but talk to other people. Have a conversation with your coworker who looks like they're having a hard time, or have a conversation with that sibling that you feel like maybe could use a little bit of encouragement, or talk to that friend who is sleeping on themselves, who isn't trying or isn't pushing, and let them know that it's okay. It's that empathy and acknowledgement that somebody may be where you were that really makes you a force for good. And then once you get more comfortable having that conversation, opening up that narrative and really normalizing those conversations, then it gets a little bit easier to share it on a bigger platform. It gets a little easier to share it more regularly. So yeah, those baby steps are important, but sometimes a baby step is just reaching out and saying, hey, I see you, I get it, and having that conversation.
Yeah. And I love that with empathy as well, because that is key. If you put it out there, you're empathetic to others, you're there for others and supporting them, you'd be amazed at how it comes back at you as well.
Well, as a member of Gen X, I am contractually obligated to give millennials a hard time. And, with each generation, we view different struggles. So as part of my perspective, I look at how far we've come in the last couple years versus the last decade versus the decades before that. It almost seems like our awareness is accelerating, our tolerance, our acceptance. But it's easy to get complacent and say, hey, look how much progress we've made, without realizing how far we have to go. How do we help? Are there challenges you've seen in millennials or other people entering the workplace that has kind of changed the role of mentorship and representation? And how can we help reach them? Because they're going to be the next group that's going to end up stepping out into the spotlight and helping champion equality, equal opportunity, equal representation. How do we reach them? Or am I just being unfairly biased against millennials, which is actually true as well?
I feel like you're not being biased. I think this happens with every generation, right? I just had a conversation with a coworker who mentioned, things are so much better. When I started in IT, it was a dangerous place for women to be in. When I started in the workforce, it was a very dangerous place for women to be in. And look at how good it is now. And it is easy to acknowledge, this was the battle when I had to fight a battle. You have a different one, and that's okay. But if you're someone who wants to help the current generation, I think what I've noticed about the environment is that it's a lot more about the emotion. It's a lot more about how you feel, how you're dealing with the way that this environment, this time frame is emotionally attacking us. Honestly, we battle with more mental and emotional health, I think, issues than we ever have, and especially with the pandemic and everything, we're dealing with a lot of that. And it's a subject, it's a narrative, but we have to acknowledge that it's okay, and here's how we work around it. I think that's been the most beneficial thing to being a mentor recently, is just acknowledging that the emotion is okay, and how can you work with it, how can you make it a benefit. I think those are acknowledging what their issue is, not marginalizing it, and then working with them on it.
Yeah. I think too, it's important to sort of empathize and really understand each individual and where they're coming from. I personally am not a generation kind of demographic kind of person, because I find it's so interesting how when I do speak to people who are much younger, they are going through similar things than what I went through when I started out. They're going through them at a different time. And so they're experiencing them differently than I have. And they might be projecting them differently, presenting them differently than I had. But it's the same kind of thing, because they too are, just starting out in the workforce, or they too are going through, different life events that I may have gone through as well. So it's a matter of kind of reaching out, hearing where they're coming from, empathizing with them, telling where you kind of came from and lessons that you've learned, because despite the fact that they may be that much younger or older, depending on who you're talking to, you've gone through similar things, and so you can relate to certain things as well, even though, again, the world is different from where I started, or where any of us have started from.
Stacey, you and I have had a few conversations. I think we're just even beginning, our journey and our friendship, which I really appreciate. And I have to say, I feel so lazy and so uninspired when I talk to you and hear about your drive. And I was just thinking, and okay, millennials, bashing on you again, you're going to have to Google this one. There was an old video game called Dig Dug, and basically you're digging through the dirt, and you couldn't go through the rocks. And you could go around them, you could make them fall. Sometimes if you stood under them too long, they fall on you and you get crushed. And if I could think of any analogy to your drive and perseverance, it's Dig Dug. Because every time you hit an obstacle, you decided, do I want to go forward now? And maybe if I don't go forward now, I'm going to get around that boulder later. And you've gone back and gone around, or you found a way around, or you found a way to get that boulder out of the way. Can you share? I'd love for you to share a little bit about, that mindset that you've never, as far as I know, you don't give up. You prioritize, but you find ways around there. And I think that is just awe-inspiring. And I'd love for people to hear a little bit more about it, because it's certainly driven me to try and do more.
So, Hans, I know that this close to you, and I share with anybody. I battle with anxiety and depression. And so on a day-to-day basis, getting out of bed is a challenge. Fighting for what I want is a challenge, but I found that you don't get to give up. You don't get to. I have, a child, I have a life, and I have a family who's pushing for me and who's driving for me. So I always have that network behind me to support me. But then the people are going to move your cheese. Things are going to change for you all the time. And if you don't flow with it, if you don't bend with the wind, you break. And that's not an option for me. And I decided a long time ago that I recognize that the things that I have to deal with may never go away. They may never get to a point where I can look back and say, oh, I remember but I will get to a point where I can say, I did it anyway. And that's my fight every single day. And I try not to look at tomorrow or next week or the week after, but really looking at today. What can I accomplish today? How can I have the biggest impact today? And so one of the things you mentioned, that I don't watch a lot of TV, but truly we are all given the same amount of hours in a day. and I can choose to come home from work and watch TV and veg out. And sometimes I do. But most days I come home and I say, okay, well, I have about 8 hours left. I am in school, so I work on schoolwork. I own a business, so I'm researching and working on how to work on that business. Or I have family to support, or I'm working on, my poetry book. Anything to make sure that when I go to sleep at night, I can look back at my day and say, I won today. That's the challenge. I'm the one I'm in competition with, and I have these invisible battles that I fight so that the ones that are on the outside are not the ones that actually are the hard part. So that's kind of how I live my life every day, and it's been really fun. There are hard days, but it's actually been really fun to be this way.
That's
That's all.
awesome, and I'm jealous of you now. So I have nothing else to say. Take care, guys. Have a great night.
I know, and Allison, now you see why I was like, you have got to meet Stacee. Like, she's amazing. And I felt the same way about Allison, getting to know her. And when Cole introduced us, like, I knew of her, but then I actually got to know her, and just the depth of your involvement and knowledge and ability to work with people, and also getting out. And one of the things that Allison has been doing is hosting shows for Infotech, including just a phenomenal interview and discussion with and of course now my brain is
Rob
rebooting. Yes, Ron Meikle, who is the CIO of Toronto, and talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and racial justice and equality and the challenges that we're facing in the workplace. And if you haven't had a chance, go to LinkedIn and Infotech Research Group or Allison page or mine. We've got it shared and liked. Just an amazing discussion, and I think that it's great to see how much both of you have accomplished. And that every time I talk to you, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just getting started. If you think that's good, just you wait. Shoot, if I would have been cute, I could have queued up the music from Hamilton with just you wait.
All the time. I promise it plays in the back of my head all the time. I'm not gonna throw away my shot every time. And it's funny, but it's true. It's like, why can't I have that much drive? Why can't I have that much energy? Why can't I push for the things I want? And nobody has told me why yet. So keep going.
That's awesome.
Well, as we're kind of hitting the time of our end of our target time, I'd love to kind of close out with any parting thoughts that you have. Anything related to the topic, anything related to the people that would be hearing that you want to leave them with, or a lot of our audience are allies, but maybe not, as we perceive it, directly in the same fight. What are some ways maybe you can add in that allies can do a better job helping with these social issues that we may not we certainly fully don't understand? How can we do a better job helping? I'll just leave it at that.
I will start with I think the most important thing is for everybody to recognize that our perceptions are all different, and that's okay. But when you don't understand, seek to understand. And if you're encountering someone who doesn't understand, seek to educate, not to demean. I think that is one of the biggest issues that we run into in this social media age, is that you've got people who want to marginalize issues because they don't understand them, or you have people who want to abuse people who don't understand necessarily. So it's an education process as we battle these things, that your perception is different from mine. You will never understand what it's like to be a Black female, and I will never understand what it's like to be a white male, and that's okay. And that's why it's important for us to have diverse teams, so that we have those different vantage points. But if you don't appreciate that and you don't seek to understand and seek to educate, then you will always run into walls. So I think we owe it to ourselves to help educate those who are around us, those who are allies or want to support us. The other thing that I will say is try. Fear is absolutely detrimental to success. but failure is an option. A lot of people live as if failure isn't an option, as if they absolutely don't want to fail and they get away from those challenges because they don't want to fail. But failure is an option. And I would argue that failure is the option. Failure is what you want when you want to grow, when you want to improve. Success is fun, but it's fleeting. Failure is long lasting and it teaches you, great things. So failure is an option. Just try and see where it lands. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say, TQL, where I work, is really looking for strong tech talent. So if there are women out there who are in tech, reach out to me. Let me know. We are looking for strong tech talent, and I would love to have more women in our organization. I think it would be fantastic. Obviously, we take everybody and we love everybody, but I, have a personal agenda that I know that there are women out there like me, even if you don't code, who have that great customer service or a drive to change. That is super valuable in tech. So just let me know. But other than that, yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. And
Allison, your thoughts?
I guess what I would say to allies is, similar to what you said, like, make sure that you are having conversations with people. Make sure that in those conversations that you're actually listening and empathizing. So that doesn't necessarily mean solutioning. That's not necessarily telling people, oh, this is where you need to go, but actually hearing them, trying to empathize, trying to, hear where they're coming from and supporting them along. If there are things that absolutely that you can suggest to help and that they're open to those things, and fine, but don't go in there thinking that you're going to solve someone else's problems. But develop a relationship with people and empathize with them, so that you can be a support to them, so that when they need a shoulder to lean on, when they need a stepping stone, you can be those things to people as well.
Well, I can't thank both of you enough for this amazing session. Definitely one of the best conversations and times. Not, often not easy to have, but I really appreciate you sharing and putting yourselves out there as role models, as champions for making the world a better place, even if it's one small step at a time. So I hope everybody in our viewing audience also enjoyed this. Please, feel free to reach out and connect to any of us on LinkedIn. If you see somebody, as both Stacee and Allison said, that you'd like to have a conversation with, go ahead. They'll accept it. It's the start. And, I met both Allison and Stacee by having just one of those conversations with two people I didn't know. One of them, I was kind of initiated. The other, Stacee reached out to me, and I would have never met and seen how amazing they were if it wasn't for that. So there are amazing people in your lives. Please take the time to reach out to that. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please look for future shows. If you really enjoyed having Allison and Stacee on the show and would like to hear more from them or more on different topics, let me know. I would love to have them back per their busy schedules as well. And I hope everyone will please stay safe, stay healthy, and look forward to seeing you on another episode. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.